Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of the formerly known FCW Superstar Spotlight, now known as the NXT Superstar Spotlight. That's right, FCW is officially dead. All FCW titles have been deactivated, and we are now full on with NXT. All the FCW stars are on NXT. The way FCW was generally booked seems to have shown up on NXT, so I am a happy person right now. NXT has been great so far, and in this episode of the newly dubbed NXT Superstar Spotlight, I will be covering, as promised multiple times on TwitWow, Kassius Ohno, formerly known as Chris Hero on the independent circuit. As you know, formerly known as FCW Superstar Spotlight, now NXT Superstar Spotlight, we have 3 segments. First segment, I discuss a brief history of the superstar, kind of give you a little bit of background on what they've done, what they're known for, different achievements that they've gotten, who they were trained by, that kind of fun stuff. Second segment, I rate them on 5 different scales: charisma, psychology, intensity, appearance, and in-ring technical ability. A little bit of a spoiler that I've been kind of throwing around there for this one is that Kassius Ohno has the highest cumulative score so far, which is a big deal because everybody knows how huge of a fan I am of Dean Ambrose, but I didn't let my subjectivity cloud my mind on this. I graded this as objectively as I could, and Kassius Ohno does indeed have a higher cumulative score than even Dean Ambrose himself. The third segment of these videos is basically my booking, my fantasy booking, my way of how I would introduce this character, this wrestler, this performer into the WWE, and I generally try and book them up to their first title. In this case, a little bit of a spoiler here, just in case you aren't really sure how well I can do this. This is going to get him to the tag title, the WWE Tag Team Championships. In my first episode, I got Richie Steamboat the Intercontinental Championship, and then I kind of went on a hiatus from the championships because my second and third episodes of this series were on people that had most recently debuted, and I just kind of said, WWE's got this covered. So, let's talk about formerly known as Chris Hero, now Kassius Ohno in the WWE. He debuted in 1998, and the reason I want to point that out is because he has actually been wrestling longer than Mr. Indie himself, Daniel Bryan, and that's a big deal to me, and that should be a big deal to you, really, if you're listening to this, because Daniel Bryan is one of those guys that has been kind of hailed as a king of the independent circuit, one of those guys that was working the indies for years and years and years and years and years before he finally got his break with the WWE. As it turns out, not only did Kassius Ohno debut before Daniel Bryan, but he got signed to the WWE after Daniel Bryan, so if anyone is the king of the indies, this is him, Chris Hero. And the only reason I'm referring to him as that is because now I'm talking more about his independent work than what he's currently doing. He was trained by a ton of people. First and foremost, Les Thatcher and Dory Funk Jr. And then in the late 90s, he had a wife-beater gimmick that was literally so offensive that he actually got women's groups to protest his shows. That being said, you can't really go on with a gimmick for that long, getting protested and people not showing up and being angry and that kind of stuff. So he eventually changed his name to Chris Hero for a more family-friendly kind of feel, ended the wife-beater gimmick in 2000. Went on to train under both Tracy Smothers and Ian Rotten before eventually going to the Blue Bloods wrestling camp, where he worked with both Dave Taylor and William Regal, and also Finlay was there as well. He trained with all 3 of those guys. As far as his independent career goes, he worked pretty much everywhere. Chikara, IWA Mid-South, CZW, PWG, ROH, even Evolve and promotion called WRP, the Wrestling Retribution Project, which actually should be debuting within the next few months. It's set to debut this year. I'm not completely sure when. It's got some pretty big stars in it, though, including him. They taped last, I believe, November. He's most well, as far as Chris Hero goes, he's most well known for his run in Ring of Honor with Claudio Castagnoli, now known as, of course, Antonio Cesaro. They were the Kings of Wrestling. They were a great tag team. They had an amazing title run. I did discuss this a little bit in my spotlight of Cesaro. Pretty much one of the most entertaining things in ROH when they were there. He signed to FCW in February of this year. That's right, February 2012. It has not been very long. He didn't win any FCW titles, but he did consistently not only put on great matches, but he got booked in main event matches a lot with the likes of Seth Rollins, Antonio Cesaro, Bo Dallas, formerly known as Bo Rotundo, and even Dean Ambrose. This guy was a star, and the guys at FCW knew it. He hasn't been pinned or technically been defeated on NXT so far, but he has lost by disqualification. He most recently, actually, on the September 5th episode of NXT, he lost by disqualification to Richie Steamboat for raking the eyes one too many times, and then he went on to beat him down after the match. But if you want to hear more about NXT, listen to Twit Wow. We will be recording tonight. It is Friday, and we will be discussing both NXT and SmackDown, so check that out later. That being said, now that you're all kind of caught up with Kassius Ohno, let's get into the ratings. I have 5 ratings that I do on every episode: charisma, psychology, intensity, appearance, and technical ability. Charisma is pretty much what it speaks of. It's, can you cut a promo in front of a live crowd and not get booed? Can you get the crowd to invest in what you're saying? Do you believe in what you're saying? It's that electricity that The Rock always talks about. Do you have the electricity? Psychology is every move that you do, whether it be on the mic, your facial expressions, your body language, in the ring, everything. Does it all have a purpose? You know, I don't want to see somebody jump up on the top rope and do a backflip just because it looks cool. I want to see them, punch a guy in the face because it's supposed to hurt and it's supposed to help them win. That's psychology. Intensity. This is pretty well self-explanatory. It's taking your promos, your in-ring work, everything you do to another level, to the point where people start to really invest. Because to me, the higher the intensity somebody has, the more lost in what they do people can get. The more invested you get, the easier it is to suspend your disbelief and believe, holy crap, this guy's really intense, he's really serious, he wants to kick this guy's tail. Appearance. I know I've been saying a lot on these that appearance is usually just who looks the most like Triple H, but it's really a combination of things. Long hair is helpful, but it's not a necessity, as proven by the likes of guys like John Cena, Randy Orton, Steve Austin, Goldberg. I could make a huge list of people that don't have long hair or have bald heads that, are huge stars and would be considered to have marketable appearances. I mean, John Cena's got the whole G.I. Joe thing going on. There are a lot of different great appearances. A giant, for example, somebody that's like 6'10", 6'11", or above and in reasonably good shape would probably get a 10 in the appearance category because it's marketable. And my last category, in-ring technical, is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, he's never going to hurt somebody in the ring because he's safe. He executes all of his moves very well. Bret Hart called himself the excellence of execution because he was very good in the ring technically. He has also referred to Randy Orton as a modern-day excellence of execution, another great example because he is another one of those guys that isn't going to hurt other people. He works very well. All of his execution is there. So that's a brief explanation of the ratings. Now let's actually get into Ohno's ratings. Charisma, this guy's very charismatic. You can hinge on every word he says. I gave him a 9 in the charisma category. He's one of those guys that has a certain aura about him, where whether he's a heel, whether he's a face, you really just want to see him succeed. And I think that can be attributed to his charisma. 9 in charisma. Moving on, psychology. He is very good as far as psychology goes. Definitely better than most of the NXT roster, but he does have a few flaws here and there. A perfect example, and I know that this is probably going to be disputed amongst the comments section because it's one of those things where it's more subjective than anything, but when he does his finisher, which is an elbow shot to the head, he sets the guy up so that he's facing the back of his head, and then he spins around and cracks him with the elbow. And that's fine. It's a little bit more flashy than just a standard elbow, but then a great example here is in a post-match beatdown on Jake Carter from last week's episode of NXT. He had Carter pinned up in the corner, almost unconscious, and he still felt the need to do a twisty spin before nailing the elbow again. That, to me, shows a very minor lack of psychology. So I gave him an 8.5 rather than a higher score. Intensity, this guy, next to Dean Ambrose himself, might be the most intense person to come through the WWE's developmental system since its inception. And by inception, I mean 2006 when FCW started up, not necessarily the whole entire, WWE developmental system with OVW and all that stuff. Very, very intense. Cuts amazing promos. This is one of those guys where even when he was in Ring of Honor, the land of people cutting terrible, awful, bland, boring promos, he stood out. He was one of those guys where when you would watch him cut a promo in Ring of Honor, you would say, man, he belongs in the WWE. He cuts amazing promos. I gave his intensity a 9.5. Almost a 10, but when I look at him and I compare him to Dean Ambrose, he's extremely close, but he just doesn't quite make the Dean Ambrose level cut as far as intensity goes. So rather than a full-on 10, I gave him a 9.5. Appearance. This is probably going to be one of those things where he and Antonio Cesaro are both, as far as wrestling goes, they both have a great look. They're very different. The difference is Cesaro doesn't really have like the facial hair and the long hair like Kassius Ohno, which really he can use to accentuate his moves. You got the hair flipping around and it looks more intense than it probably really is. But with Cesaro, he's more ripped, he's huge, he's bulky, he looks tougher. I gave Cesaro a 9.5, and I'm going to give Kassius Ohno a 9.5 as well. But as I said, for very different reasons. With Cesaro, I said that he could put on more bulk. I was probably just being way too nitpicky there, but in reality, he does have a great look, and that can really be said for Kassius Ohno. He can put on more bulk. He's fit, but he's fit in a CM Punk kind of way, not in a Triple H kind of way. And I know that you kind of can think back to the promos that Triple H cut on CM Punk during their little feud during 2011, and that's a great example of a way to describe Kassius Ohno. So, as far as his look goes, though, I do want to make a little bit of a side note. He used to be extremely heavy. In the early 2000s, he was a really big, chubby guy, and he used to work with a Superman shirt, so it would cover him up, and he has lost a lot of weight. He has come a very, very long way from those days, so I do want to give him props for that. Still going to stick his appearance at a 9.5 rather than a 10, though, because as great as it is that he's come this far, he still has a little ways to go as far as the appearance goes. Just get shredded. If you get shredded, Kassius, you're going to be a freaking star forever, which I'm sure you will be anyway, but it's one of those things where the WWE likes their guys to have very, very toned muscles, and I don't see that in Kassius Ohno. So, last category, in-ring technical ability. He is the best that NXT has to offer as far as in-ring technical ability goes. I know I didn't give Dean Ambrose a super high score in in-ring technical, and I do believe this is the highest score I've given anyone in the in-ring technical ability category. Kassius Ohno gets a 9 for the in-ring technical. He is extremely good in the ring. Extremely, I don't want to get too redundant, but extremely technical in the ring. He abuses the cravat. He uses all kinds of different holds. Indie fans love him because he has a massive signature move set that people recognize, and he's just very, very good as far as the in-ring work goes. So that's the ratings. A grand total of 45.5. Dean Ambrose was somewhere in the 41-42 category out of 50. So this is definitely the highest overall rating I've given anybody, and it is very well deserved because Kassius Ohno is amazing at what he does. Now let's get into my personal favorite part, the fantasy booking. Now, there's a really easy way to kind of ease him into the hearts of the WWE Universe, and that, in my eyes, is to debut him on a WWE pay-per-view going one-on-one with Seth Rollins, who is the current NXT champion, for the NXT Championship. I think that Night of Champions would be a great time to do that because, every title must be defended unless you count the NXT title, because I highly doubt they're going to do it. But I would love to see it happen. If not, really any pay-per-view. Hell in a Cell, Survivor Series, TLC, it doesn't matter. I just want to see the NXT title make an appearance on pay-per-view, and I do think that Kassius Ohno is the perfect opponent for Seth Rollins to do that debut of the NXT title on a pay-per-view. So you introduce him to the WWE Universe on the pay-per-view versus Seth Rollins for the title. And then afterwards, you give him Raw matches every now and then. We all know that he works great on NXT, but you can tell he is a big fish in a small pond there. Put him on Raw. It doesn't even have to be every single week. He doesn't have to pull a Ryback or a Cesaro where he's on every single week. Just put him on every 2 or 3 weeks to keep him in the minds of the WWE Universe. Put him against the lower mid-card babyfaces like the Trent Beretta, Yoshi Tatsu, Santino Marella, Zack Ryder, the guys that the WWE Universe pops for that he can get over as a heel on. Eventually, though, we're going to have him in a match against whoever is at the time, whatever babyface at the time is going for Antonio Cesaro's United States Championship. So we have Kassius Ohno versus whoever is chasing Cesaro. Cesaro interferes. He beats down the babyface, costs Kassius Ohno the match by disqualification, and then after the match we get a stare down. And after a few seconds of them staring each other down, they shake hands, they embrace, and we have an established heel tag team, formerly known as the Kings of Wrestling. I don't know what they would call it in the WWE, but whatever it is, it doesn't matter because these guys are freaking dynamic together. And Cesaro would be the U.S. champ, although that wouldn't be a requirement. He could lose it eventually before they win the tag titles. I did kind of spoil earlier that Ohno's first title would be the tag championship. So we have, in one of the following weeks after they kind of form their tag team, they cut a promo on the tag division talking about how there are no real tag teams and that everyone's just thrown together, and they meet up and they say, hey, I don't know you, but let's see if we can be a tag team. Talk about how they have actual history together, that they worked together for years on the independent circuit. Don't actually acknowledge that they were called the Kings of Wrestling or anything like that, but it could be cool, but not necessary. Just acknowledge that they have history together and that they are a real tag team. Get that over. And then just a little bit of a side note here, I would have the tag titles on Kane and Daniel Bryan at this point. I do think that they are set to win those titles within the next 3 months or so, and rightfully so because they are just plain awesome together. However, they would be winning the titles from a little tag team called Our Boom. And I would say that right around Royal Rumble Elimination Chamber time, we would have a little bit of a switcheroo where Kane and Daniel Bryan win the tag titles, enter Sin Cara and Rey Mysterio as a babyface tag team to go after the tag titles. Meanwhile, Our Boom needs something to do, so we have a little mini feud between them and Cesaro and Ohno. We have a tag team feud there. We have a tag team feud for the titles. WWE's tag team division is starting to look very hot. And that's one thing I do try and do whenever I book these FCW Superstar Spotlights. You saw in the last video with Dean Ambrose, not only was I trying to get Ambrose over, I was also trying to tweak the John Cena character a little bit to give people something fresh and force him to challenge his morals and all this stuff. In this case, I'm trying to give the tag division more prestige. And I think that this would work very well to do that. So we have Cesaro and Ohno starting a program with Our Boom, which they will eventually go on to win somewhere around WrestleMania season, at which point Sin Cara and Rey Mysterio would also win the tag titles from Kane and Daniel Bryan. I think you know where this is going. Post-WrestleMania, we have a feud between Cesaro and Ohno and Sin Cara and Mysterio. I would eventually, not right away, eventually have Cesaro and Ohno win the tag titles off of them sometime around June, July, maybe August at the latest if we want to have a SummerSlam blow-off, but that wouldn't be necessary. Regardless, this would get the tag titles on them. It would establish them as a great tag team. And of course, as all tag teams do in the WWE, it would set them up to break up somewhere down the line and create at least one singles push, if not two, because let's face it, Cesaro and Ohno both have singles stars written all over them. I've said in the past that I feel like Kassius Ohno and Dean Ambrose are the future top babyface and heel of the WWE, and I do mean that. I feel like while Ambrose is a heel for life, Kassius Ohno is amazing, and he can pull off being a babyface. Right now, he's rocking a huge lumberjack beard, and all it would take is a quick trim of that, and maybe a little bit of a trim of the hair, and he would be a top baby, or have a top babyface's look. And he knows how to work it. He's a very, very great worker as far as in-ring, mic, whatever. You already know that, though. I've kind of explained it to you already. Regardless, I do think that Ohno can be a top-level babyface, and I don't just mean, CM Punk, somebody that thinks he can be the face of the company but has to turn heel because John Cena exists kind of guy. I mean, he can be a top number one, top level, merch selling fiend babyface. Kassius Ohno. He even has a marketable name. Oh no. And he came up with that on his own. He's a rap advocate, and he's got all these rhymes lined up for the Ohno thing, and the Kassius bashes and leaves his opponents with gashes and all this great stuff. And if you haven't already, go out of your way, check out some Kassius Ohno matches. If you're not feeling the WWE stuff, watch some Chris Hero matches. Regardless, this guy is great. Be sure to check him out if you haven't already. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this already know who he is and are just kind of listening to see what I have to say. But if you haven't heard of him, or if you haven't seen him work, or if you haven't heard him cut a promo, because he's great at that too, go out of your way, go on YouTube, check him out. Regardless, I want to make this series more fan-driven. I like what I did last time. I said Kassius Ohno or Corey Graves. You guys picked Kassius Ohno. So this time I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to give you 3 options. Your options this time are Corey Graves, because he was part of the poll last time and didn't get picked. Seth Rollins, who is the current NXT champion. Or, and this is kind of a wild card, Paige. She is a diva. Would make it my first ever diva, but I think some people might want to pick one of the other 2 guys before her. Just know that all 3 of them will eventually get discussed in a spotlight. So, that being said, I'm Ian Izzle, signing out.